Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
It's our custom to go around and introduce ourselves either by first name or first and last name. And since today's Father's Day, as an acknowledgement, if you would like to say something about being a father or about your father or anything in that vein of fatherhood, I invite you to do that. It's a short comment. My name is Ray Dyer.
I'm Doug. I'm leaving today to take my father's ashes to his hometown in Iowa.
My name is Mark, and my father was a good man.
My name is Michael. My father died in 1996. His name was Edmund.
I'm George Hubbard. I appreciate my brother's fatherhood.
My name's Gary, and I miss my father.
My name's Cass, and I didn't know my father very well.
My name is Peter, and I'm grateful for all my dad's taught me.
My name is Bill. Happy Father's Day, Dad.
My name is Marvin. I am a father, and of course I also have a father who passed away 2 years ago. And I'm remembering him today.
My name is Joe, and I'm also thinking of my father today. He passed away about 10 years ago.
My name is Carl. My father was a character, and he died in 1984, so thinking about him today.
I'm Kane Matsuda. My father is still in very good health, plays tennis and golf all the time.
My name is Rich. I'm a father and not a father.
My name is Henry Rubinowitz.
My name is Jay. I'm going to call my father this afternoon before I forget.
I'm Todd Hope, and I thank my father for my curiosity and inquisitiveness.
My name is Peter, and my father and I don't make good music together.
My name is Richard, and I'm flying east tomorrow to visit him. I don't get to see him very often. It's the only part I don't like about being on the West Coast.
My name is Marty, and I talked to my father this morning. I never got along with him most of my life, but in the last couple of years, things have shifted, and I've been actually kind of helping him rediscover his Catholicism and his Irish heritage, and it's been very interesting.
My name is Ed, and my father died this year 3 days before Christmas.
My name is Scott, and I'm thinking today about how terrible it is when I'm estranged from my father.
My name is David, and my dad is 95 years old, and he always tries to make the most of each day, even when things are difficult.
I'm Peter.
My name is Harley, and my father passed away many years ago, but I do appreciate the influence of his love, adventure, music, and just love of life.
I'm Jack. My father's been dead for almost 30 years. We've had issues.
I'm Leor. My father's been dead for 30 years, and we also had lots of issues.
My name is Lee, and I'm very grateful that my father lived long enough to 94 so that in his late 80s I became aware that what I had always thought of as lack of emotion and presence was actually Buddhist equanimity. And I'm very grateful for the little I've learned of it.
My name is Clint, and I grew up with
we stayed at home, took care of the kids, and the father supported us. And I took that totally for granted as a kid, but it amazes me now that he took on the responsibility single-handedly of supporting a wife and 3 kids, when I have trouble sometimes supporting just myself. So I really honor him for his efforts and for his always being there, for the integrity that he had, taking on the responsibility.
I'm Tomas. My father died when I was in high school, and I had a much better relationship with him since he's gone.
I'm Tom, and I still wonder if my father is gay.
My name is Jerry. My dad's still alive. He's 81, and what amazes me is how much alike we are. It's almost eerie. We clear our throats the same way, we act the same way. I've been trying to escape him for many years, and it's coming back to me.
My name's Paul. My dad's been dead for over 20 years. No. 13 years. As a kid, I was frightened of him, and I've spent a lot of time healing on my part and been fairly successful, and I prayed for him. I thought of him. I contacted him during meditation.
I'm Richard. My dad's been gone for quite a long time. We had a lot of issues too. I've come to, I think, accept that he did the best he could.
My name is Roy. My dad has Parkinson's, and he's unable to speak in any way, but I think I've been able to communicate more with him in this state than probably ever in my life.
My name's Jim.
My name is Jim. My dad's been dead for 22 years. He was a very great man, and it was a real trip being in his shadow.
My name is Steve. My dad died 20 years ago when he was 72. And I didn't know him well when he was alive. I do now, and each year I get to know him better.
My name is Joe, and I feel like I've fathered a lot of generations of young artists, which has been a real joy for me.
My name is Roy, and right now what I'm thinking about my dad is when I came out to him, he said to me, you know, I always knew you were gay, son. He goes, you know, girls never really came around as much. You always had guy friends around. He goes, remember when we went shopping last week? And I said, yeah. I was going to ask you then. And I said, you were? And he goes, yeah. And I go, how come you didn't? He goes, well, you know, I was kind of embarrassed and I wanted to give you your space, but, you know, he told me he loved me, gave me a kiss and a hug, and that I'd always be his great son. Thank you for this opportunity.
My name is Jim. My father's been dead over 30 years and still struggling with forgiveness for his abandoning me and trying to understand what it is that he went through that made life so hard for him.
A couple more.
I'm Dennis. My father's been gone since 84. It's 24 years now. And there were a lot of issues, but I managed to forgive him and try to put myself in his shoes and be able to work things out that way.
My name's Chris, and for better or for worse, I really don't have a lot to say about my father.
I'm Tom, and my father was deeply religious, and in a very kind way.
Thank you. Well, our speaker today is a member of the Sangha, Tom Thurston. And Tom grew up in a small town in East Tennessee and spent 15 years in a religious order of the Roman Catholic Church called the Christian Brothers. His degrees are in theology. He taught high school religion for 6 years in the Midwest and then went to Manila in the Philippines to teach theology at the university run by the brothers there. He came to the Bay Area in 1982 to do doctoral studies at Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. where he completed a Ph.D. and wrote his dissertation on homosexuality and Roman Catholic sexual ethics. During this time, he came out of the closet and left the brothers. He remained an academic at heart. He saw how people who left the religion of their youth often put together a hodgepodge of incomplete ideas that ended up working no better for them than the religion they left behind. He thought he could make the whole process uncomplicated. To address this issue, he wrote a book called The Meaning of Life in 3 Easy Steps. Currently, he was looking for an agent for his book.
Thank you. I'd like to start off, or to talk about a particular part of the book, the nature of happiness. But to do that, I'd like to start off with a talk like some members of the Sangha have given on how they came to the Dharma. I'd like to do a little twist on that, how I came to the Sangha. As I said, I spent 15 years in a Roman Catholic religious order. In the order, there's basically 2 types of prayer, active prayer and mental prayer. Active prayer is the Mass, the Divine Office, basically any prayer that is either recited or sung. And mental prayer is like meditation. I entered the order in 1970. This was in the period of the renewal of the Catholic Church. And at that time there was a lot of reaction against a lot of the structures in the church. And we had in the order a very structured form of mental prayer. And there was a strong reaction against that. I was not taught that method of mental prayer. I learned little bits about it. But people didn't like it because of its rigidity. And they didn't know really what to teach us. We were kind of left on our own. So it's whatever we happened to read, whether it be Teresa of Avila or Thomas Merton or whatever the fashionable retreat this month was. The basic focus of the mental prayer was to develop a sense of inner silence and also devotion. It is very other-oriented in contrast to what I experienced in Vipassana meditation. There's the God out there. Some years later, I was in Oklahoma where I was teaching high school and was involved with a group that was protesting and trying to prevent the building of a nuclear power plant. And my affinity group had a spiritual leader, Jay Whitecrow. Jay Whitecrow was a Cherokee medicine man, and he led the group in sweat lodges. So that was my introduction to Native American spirituality. And that had a lot of good common sense characteristics to me. I went from Oklahoma to the Philippines. In the Philippines, I had an academic interest in folk Catholicism. Folk Catholicism, however, didn't appeal to me personally. What did seem more spiritually serious, there's a fairly significant Chinese population in the Philippines, and Chinese Buddhism did seem more spiritually serious and promising. So when I came back to the United States, to Berkeley, to do doctoral studies, my intention was to do doctoral studies in an area called interreligious dialogue, and study specifically the Chinese Buddhist traditions. However, I ran afoul of language studies at the time. It was either pass Chinese or pass everything else, and I opted for everything else, and ended up doing a degree in Christian theology and with a dissertation on homosexuality and Roman Catholic sexual ethics. This was perhaps not the most brilliant career move. So after finishing the degree, not getting a teaching position in the Catholic University, in the dissertation I had criticisms of Catholic theology, and the criticisms became sharper and sharper, and found myself outside the Catholic Church and exploring. I went to MCC for a while when Jim Matulski was the pastor, but when Jim left, the pastors who replaced him were more evangelical, and this whole Jesus is my imaginary friend thing didn't work for me very well. In the meantime, I was teaching in a great books program for adult undergraduates at St. Mary's College, and one of the books in the curriculum was an autobiography of Gandhi, edited by Louis Fisher. And Gandhi called himself a devotee of the truth. He's picking up on the bhakti tradition in Hinduism, but devoted to the truth. And that made a great deal of sense for me. And I said, well, yeah, that works for me. I was deeply influenced by Gandhi. I was a vegetarian for 8 years, inspired by Gandhi. And I still think of myself as a devotee of the truth. I never found a Hindu group that I plugged into. During this period, I did also explore neo-paganism. Neo-paganism is great fun. It's Wicca, goddess worship, nature worship, and it's very intuitive. I like that. The groups that I was involved with considered it a revival of the ancient religions of northwestern Europe. But there were those who said, oh, we say it's a revival, but actually we made this all up, most of it since World War II. And that was a perfectly valid approach to neo-paganism, that it was all made up, it was all psychological, and you could have a psychological explanation for it. And that worked fine, and there was no tension between the people who thought of it as revival and people who thought of it as psychological. I did, however, find the neo-pagans kind of disorganized and kind of actually, this is the reason historically why, or one of the reasons why Christianity prevailed against paganism, is because Christianity was hierarchical, monarchical in structure, better organized, and able to oppress the pagans. My ex-lover was Thai, and he introduced me to the Vipassana tradition, and actually the two of us used to come here. After we broke up, I didn't continue coming here. I discontinued my practice. But looking back broadly at my spiritual explorations, I saw that there was something in common about the various religious traditions and spiritual traditions. They all diagnose a problem in the human condition, and they all offered a cure. Humanity in general is miserable, but the adherents of my tradition are not. Fundamentally, what they all came down to was, don't worry, be happy. I wish I had known this before I started my degree program. A few of you may remember that from Bobby McFerrin's song. Or probably most of you do, and some of you no doubt remember this, that he got it from Meyer Baba. I have noticed that a lot of people who left the religion in their youth didn't leave the baggage of that tradition. They make their whole spiritual quest a very complicated thing, and by allowing it to be complicated, they justify carrying around the baggage that they had, because how could I possibly work through all of this? Commonly, they're not helped by the would-be spiritual guides. These are people that I call merchants of meaning. The merchants of meaning have a vested interest in keeping the whole thing complicated, so that they can make a living out of guiding people through the maze. In order to sustain a market for their product, they need to keep it fairly complex and just beyond the grasp of their minions. I didn't think the whole process should be that difficult, so I wrote the book. Got about halfway through a draft of the first chapter when it occurred to me that I should do some research. The people who wrote about it, the research I did was in a relatively new area called happiness studies. The people who write on this tend to be cognitive behavioral psychologists. Tom Moon, who spoke to this group a few weeks ago, is on the therapeutic side of that. The same set of data, same methods. The therapists focus on fixing problems. The people who write in happiness studies tend to focus on, well, what is right when things are going right. But it's the same area. And as I read these, it occurred to me, this sounds a lot like Buddhism. So I thought, well, I should get involved with the Buddhist group again. And that's how I came to the Sangha. The three steps in the meaning of life that I write about relate to the three basic fundamental ways of viewing human experience. First of all is direct. Is emotion, direct, unmediated, uninterpreted experience. The second is interactive. The world acting upon me, my acting upon the world, my acting with other people. That's the level of ethics. And the Buddhist term for my approach to that would be having compassion. The third is the level of intention. Intention, action, evaluation. Meaning is found on the level of intention and interpretation. And the Buddhist articulation of that would be the Bodhisattva vow. Act so as to save all beings from suffering. But the first step is don't worry, be happy. In order to approach happiness, the first thing we need to do is stop worrying. When we experience stress or threats or danger, a part of our brain, which the parts have long Latin names, but it's basically the reptilian brain, tends to take over at threats. And it tends to override the parts of the brain that evolved later, the cerebral cortex, because thinking is far too slow. It says, I've been doing this for 200 million years. I'm in charge. Often by the time the thinking brain takes over, the best that it can do is rationalize what it discovers that we've done here. So what do we do about that? Well, we've had speakers that talk about mindfulness and talk about paying attention to when we're about to head down that dark path and intervening. Those speakers have spoken rather eloquently about that, so I'll just remind you of that rather than talk about it. Worry, I'd like to point out, is not a pathology. Stress is not a pathology. It is a sign that something negative is going on. It's important to pay attention to the sign to see what it's pointing to and address the problem. It's also important not to let the worry take on a life of its own. Negative emotions always tend to overreact. They tend to oversignal because the downside of not noticing a danger is much greater than the downside of getting too strong a signal about a danger. But we can't let those signals take on a life of their own. Happiness, joy, pleasure, satisfaction. These, in contrast, alert us to something positive. If we want to have more happiness, we should pay attention to the things that trigger these signs, these signals. Don't want to focus too much on the signal itself. If you're going to go to Healdsburg and you see a sign that says Healdsburg 29 miles, you don't get out of the car and rejoice at the sign. The sign is an indication that you're going in the right direction. Similarly, happiness is a signal that you're going in a good direction. It's a signal to something positive, some positive thing out there, something that's good for us. There are at least 4 different types of happiness, and organized around 4 different neurotransmitters, chemicals in the brain that send messages. The first one I'd like to talk about is the neurotransmitter is dopamine. Dopamine is a signal of desire. It alerts us that there's something new out there, and it makes that new thing attractive. It activates our other the gateways for other neurotransmitters. So now that we see something is desirable, we say, "Oh, what resources do I need to muster in order to get that desirable thing?" Dopamine desire is indiscriminate. It could direct us towards finding a cure for AIDS. It could say, what I really need to do is buy the latest, biggest Lexus. It could say that I need to climb the corporate ladder and crush everyone along the way. It could say that I need to set up a midnight basketball game for high school dropouts. Dopamine propels us towards what is new without any particular judgments of whether that new thing is actually going to be worthwhile or good or not. So clearly, dopamine needs some checks put on it. Dopamine is involved with every form of chemical dependency. Dopamine is involved with our basest human behaviors. It's also involved with our most noble actions. Second is opioids. Dopamine focuses on the future. Opioids say, hey, there's something here in the present that's good. Pay attention to it. Opioid, as the name suggests, is a chemical in the brain that has the ability to act like opium. Opium can block pain, block unhappiness, give us a dull sense of happiness. Opioid neurotransmitters alert us to something right here in the present that's good. Usually it's related to a direct physical experience. A nice steak. Omar Khayyam talked about a loaf of bread, a jug of wine, and thou. All 3 of those can set off opioids. Better if they're in combination. When we stop and smell the roses, opioids are activated. Of course, if dopamine didn't say, you have to get out here in the dead of winter, in the cold earth, and plant bare root roses so that your front yard can look better than your neighbor's front yard, then you wouldn't have roses. Dopamine can be ruinously extravagant. A lot of the triggers of opioids are not particularly expensive. A nice piece of pie. Some of the opioid triggers are not only free, but directly wellness enhancing, like a brisk walk in the park. Opioids, pleasure, primarily physical pleasure. Oxytocin. Oxytocin functions both as a neurotransmitter and a hormone. As a hormone, one of its primary functions is contractions during labor. As a neurotransmitter, it's most widely known as functioning during sexual arousal. For women, oxytocin levels rise throughout sexual arousal. In men, the hormone that rises during sexual arousal, our neurotransmitter is vasopressin, which is related to aggression. Only as we approach climax does vasopressin levels drop and oxytocin level rises. And it stays high through post-coital cuddling. It's been called the cuddle hormone. Oxytocin has the ability to increase the trust between human beings, to lower our worries about the risk of opening up to a relationship. It promotes a general feeling of well-being. It's not just involved with sexual encounters. Oxytocin is involved in any affectionate relationship, anytime we engage in affectionate action. Dopamine drives us to discover the next big thing. Oxytocin weakens dopamine's tendency to make us restless, to make us dissatisfied with the present situation. Oxytocin enhances our ability to focus on the current big thing. The fourth is serotonin. While dopamine, opioids, oxytocin all tend to be situation specific, serotonin tends to be more generalized. It focuses on our satisfaction, our general satisfaction with our life situation now. It has a tendency to, the ability to reduce our anxieties, to make us appreciate our situation. We might think that because it's the fourth in my organization scheme, in the fourth level, related to the fourth level of happiness, it is particularly characteristic of that part of the brain that evolved last, the developed cerebral cortex, which is only in a few animals, apes, including ourselves, dolphins, whales. This is not the case. Serotonin is produced at the end of the spinal cord, one of those primitive areas of the brain. Even mollusks have serotonin. I have no idea what the emotional life of a clam is. But apparently, you may not be as happy as a clam, you can be happy like a clam. Serotonin suppresses negative emotions and increases sociability and cooperation. It's not so much related to pleasure as it is to general well-being. Evolution. Evolution doesn't demand from us that, from its children, that anything more than that they themselves have children and raise their children to the point where their children can have children. Evolution doesn't demand that we have a nice car. Evolution doesn't demand that we have a good job. But we have in our genes this history of scarcity and this history of competition. Remember, apes or chimpanzees, that their social status is highly related to their prospect of reproducing. Well, those are our cousins. So our genes are hardwired towards making us think there's some bigger, better happiness out there that we don't have yet, that we have to have. And this is the great joke that evolution is playing on us. If we're able to enjoy family and friends in relative security, we basically have all the components that we need for happiness. Our brains should flood with serotonin fairly regularly. This is the lesson that Dorothy learned in the Land of Oz. If I ever go searching for my heart's desire again, I know I don't need to look any further than my own backyard. So if you look at what serotonin or what dopamine has to strive for, there are basically two types of goods. One is a positional good, and the other is a non-positional good. Positional goods have a value, have the ability, at least in our imagination, to increase our status relative to others. They tell me that I need to have not just a nice car, but I have to have a bigger, faster, more expensive, newer car than you do. Positional goods are all the new and wonderful things that we think will make us happy until we actually get them. Getting something new, the joy that we get from getting something new lasts anywhere from a few seconds to about 6 months. People who win the lotto are not substantially happier a year after they win the lotto than they are the day before they won the lotto. And in general, people who have experienced a disabling injury are not significantly less happy a year after their disabling injury than they were the day before they were injured. The lesson is that devoting all our energies to positional goods is probably not the best strategy for getting stable and enduring happiness. Non-positional goods are goods whose value to me are unrelated to how much of them you have, such as friendships, close relationships. My having friendships does not diminish the value of your friendships to you, and your friendships don't threaten mine. Things like being healthy, satisfaction with helping other people, making a better world. So finally, I'd like to point out that these four types of happiness, desire or striving, pleasure, relationships, satisfaction, are not a hierarchy. That a deficit in any one of them can crash the other three. So it's not one is better than the other. In fact, if you want to have all four, it might be a good idea to put it on your calendar. So you specifically schedule time for relationships, time to do things that are enjoyable, as well as time to advance and strive and do excellent things. Finally, and in every case, happiness is a signal. As soon as the message comes across, the signal is no longer needed. So the signal goes away. This is why happiness and all forms of happiness are transient. If any happiness signal stayed around too long, then we'd focus too much on it, and we wouldn't move on to the next thing that we need to do that's good for us. This brings us back to how this sounds like Buddhism. This is the fundamental transience of human experience. Any comments or reactions? Yeah.
I was curious what your research involved.
The books I read mainly were in happiness studies, largely by cognitive psychologists. There's been some interesting work on ethics, and they draw a lot from animal behaviorists, like Van der Waal. But that's chapter 2.
So, of the 4 neurotransmitters you talked about, or those 4 types of happiness we experience, which category would be triggered by doing kind acts for others? Feeding the homeless and things like that. That make you feel good. But which one of those is that?
Well, I would say that desire is because I'm involved with my community and in redevelopment, and you want to achieve. And this achievement is achievement of this good for other people. This dopamine is indiscriminate. It can drive you towards achieving good things or drive you towards ruinous extravagance. But it also has the consequence of bringing about general satisfaction. So I think it would be both of those.
In your research, go into people who research levels of consciousness, like Wilbur. For instance, happiness on one level of consciousness might be buying a new car. Happiness on another, presumably higher level of consciousness, would be, going out and doing an act where other people benefit from it. And with some categorization of the happiness that the goals of a particular type of happiness for a different level of consciousness?
I didn't find many people that talked about levels of consciousness.
I was thinking like Tim Wilbur, for instance.
I didn't read him. The people that I read didn't talk about levels of consciousness. One of the things they did talk about was there's a wonderful book called Use Your Mind, Change Your Brain. And it's written by a woman who is a journalist of science about a group of scientists that work with the Dalai Lama and study brain patterns of people who were serious meditators. And negative emotions tend to be processed by your right prefrontal cortex, and positive emotions tend to be processed by your left prefrontal cortex. They found that long-time meditators had an amazing ability to calm their right prefrontal cortex and activate their left prefrontal cortex at will through meditation, to the point of dominance of as much as 98%. So I don't know if that's levels of consciousness or not. It is mental abilities.
To sort of follow up on that issue, I've wondered about some of the examples that you gave where it isn't the things that aren't relative. So the research that some of the research I've run across is that unfortunately our happiness, my happiness, to personalize it, is heavily dependent upon comparisons to others. And it strikes me that even in things like health, like there's the old saying, I felt badly that I had no shoes until I saw a man that had no legs. Or, gee, I feel good, I have several friends. Well, my acquaintance over there has hundreds of friends. Or, I went to the baths and I had good sex with one person, but my friend over there had sex with 3 trophy men. And so the piece that doesn't seem like that to me is compassion. And then the other one, which somebody talked about it at the other Buddhist group a while ago, is sympathetic joy. And pointing out that sympathetic joy is just not, it doesn't have to just be the selfless thing, well, it's good for them, but it's also, it gives us more opportunities to experience joy. So I wondered how those issues fit into.
I think it has to do with skillful mental practices. Because if I say, that person has more friends than I do, well, I can take this as diminishing my status, but I don't have to. So it's, how skillful am I? It's being aware and saying, oh, look what I'm doing. I'm making this a status thing when it doesn't have to be.
I guess I was a little confused about that distinction, and I think in Lee's example, I think especially from a Buddhist perspective, there's lots of reframing, like, I don't really care about the 3 trophy men, and so I'm more likely to be content with my experience if I'm happy with it. But I guess it's hard for me to understand, like, is there anything that's truly positional in the modern world? If there's only one deer that we can eat and I have it and you don't, I understand that. But most stuff in the modern world is not, it's not so finite that, I have this and others don't. To me it seems like there's always framing and it's always...
And that's the point that, genetically we're programmed to think this way, to make everything positional. And that we're, from an evolutionary point of view, almost everybody who is, if you want to talk about reproduction, people are not excluded from the opportunity for reproducing because of, or very many at all are. It's not like the chimpanzees, where the lower ranking chimpanzees never have access to the females. People of all ranks reproduce in our society, so that's not a danger. Nevertheless, we continue to act as though everything is positional, and we tend to make a competition. If we're not skillful, we tend to make a competition out of everything.
In your experience as a person with a lifelong spiritual calling, do you make a distinction between the brain and the mind?
I'm having had this spiritual wandering. It made me very. I like to use terms that I know what they mean, because I've hashed through a lot of stuff, and well, actually, there's John Searle, the philosopher at Berkeley, kind of addresses the issue in a book that he calls The Mind, and he says mind is brain and mind refer to things from a different perspective. To use computer language, my brain looks at it from a component's perspective, and mind looks at it as from a systems perspective. But they're actually referring to the same thing. I find that a helpful explanation.
I was particularly intrigued to be here today because I believe something of your Catholic background. And one of the things that has been of interest to me for quite a while is Catholicism gets bashed in a sense. And I think I wrote a paper years and years ago, a short one, on the fact that people may bash America, but we know there are many saints that come out of America, so to speak, like Martin Luther King. There's a lot of good things about America, but when you look at the president, you might not be happy about America and other countries and some of the things that it's done. I think the Catholic Church in many ways is the same way. We look at church with 7 sacraments. We look at church that has produced some enormously powerful saints. We have deep spirituality that comes out of the Benedictine tradition and what have you. And it sort of saddens me that Catholicism is so easy to trash, or even Christianity for that sense. And clearly there are just there are no parallels to Christianity and Catholicism in terms of its spirituality to Buddhism and anything else. Than the negative point. So I was particularly interested in maybe hearing you say something more qualitative than just the sort of wholesale the thrashing of the Roman Catholic Church, particularly in light of the fact that I don't know what you would say the percentage of gay men are who are priests, but obviously they are genuinely getting something out of their vocations and out of the work that they do, out of their spirituality, out of their commitment, out of their work. We're talking about a church of faith, hope, and charity, faith, hope, and love. God is everywhere. There's a lot of very powerful components of Catholicism that has enriched people. And if you ever work with children, you know how important it is to try to build structure so that they can learn some sense of commitment, some sense of faith, hope, and love. So I'm just wondering, with your Catholic background and understanding, as gay men, who have been hurt by, Catholicism, no less than, the Halloween letter by the person who's now the Pope. So I think that we've got ourselves in a problem with just this wholesale trashing that Christianity trashing the Catholic Church.
And I think that it comes down to, for those of us who have, I no longer think of myself as an ex-Catholic because that defines just you as what you're not. It's a matter of compassion. Toni Morrison wrote in The Bluest Eye that love is no better than the person who loves. Love is no better than the lover. And our experience of the church or particular people in the church, these are people who are no more perfect than I am, and therefore their expressions in the way that they live out their lives is no more brilliant than I do, and I should not judge them by a higher standard than I myself would like to be judged by. Religious institutions tend to be repositories of the wisdom of the ages, also to some extent repositories of the flaws of the ages. A lot of the things you'll find in the church, you wouldn't have found in the church of 2,000 years ago, because you have this accumulated tradition. Some of the there is the tradition of love of neighbor, and how do you work that out? It was the church that ended the gladiator fights and shut down the Colosseum, which was a horrid place. Look upon it with compassion. I think in terms of the priest, the gay priest, one of the images, because the Catholic Church has the crucifix, which is the cross with Jesus affixed to it, and Jesus always kind of buffed and not wearing very much. And I think that on a subliminal level, you have 2,000 years of boys that are getting inklings of their feelings in the church, looking at this cross. And I don't think that that's unrelated to the concentration of gay men in religious orders and in the priesthood. I think this is the legacy of Jesus to the beloved disciple.
Tom, will you be available for more questions?
Sure.
After we need to move on. Do we have a host today?
I am the host.
Okay.
My name is Bill. I'm your host today. We've got some goodies out there that you can enjoy while you socialize. Brownies, there's lemon cake, there's strawberries as well. There's also tea out there, and for those of you who don't know, if you do have some tea, please wash out your cup before you leave. I'll be coming around with a Donna bowl, and contributions are always welcome, and the suggested contribution is $5 to $8. If anybody here is a newcomer, is anybody here for the first or second time? Okay, well, there's a sign-up sheet if you haven't seen it already. Right out there, if you're interested in receiving our newsletter, as well as if you're interested in being on the directory that lists all the members that choose to list themselves. There's a sign-up sheet, and you can put your information on the pink sign-up sheet out there. Lastly, there's usually an informal gathering of people who want to go out to lunch after the social time, and you're all welcome to join. Usually they gather right by the front door around 12:30.
Any other announcements?
Yeah, the GPF steering committee met last night at a dinner generously hosted by Tim Stewart. Excellent dinner, by the way. And I have a little report out on that. One is, as we reviewed the situation, attendance, as witnessed today, is at record levels, very strong. And we should all gain some satisfaction in that. We are reaching out into the world through a newly renovated web page, and if any of you haven't viewed that, you should make use of the resources there and recommend it to others. And finally, we do live in a capitalist society, so we looked at income and expenses, and even sanghas have to be conscious of that, and they're in balance, so things are looking good there. Of course, we do have an issue or two that I need to bring to your attention. And the biggest issue pressing on us right now is the publication of our newsletter. 6 times a year, we put this newsletter out. It goes on the web page, so it's available worldwide. But even more importantly, it's a hard copy that we mail out to people that don't have that technology available to them. It's quite a production, actually. We have a number of people participating in it now. Michael Landon as the editor, Michael Gabel as does the design and layout. We have transcribers of the talks that we have here, because often we take the transcription of the talk and include it in the handout, in the newsletter. And then we have mailing list people and the newsletter mailing party leader, Jack Busby. All these people contribute to them. Announcements come in to be put in here. We're noticing that we really need somebody to pull this all together in a timely way. So we're looking for a newsletter manager, or a newsletter production manager. And in viewing the situation and looking at the crises that we've recently been through over the past couple of issues of this, the steering committee has determined that we really can't issue the next newsletter until we receive a volunteer who will own the newsletter and manage its production. So I'll be in the outer room here during the social hour looking for at least one young man for that job. So please do consider it. There are many gifted people in the room here who could easily do this job. It's more a managerial job. You don't have to have technical skills to do this. We're not talking about an editing or a writing or a formatting type thing. Once this person is selected, the steering committee would like to meet with the entire team that does the newsletter so that we can make it streamlined activities and knit the team together as effectively as possible. Now, beyond that, that is the main point of the news. But beyond that, we do have the renovated website that I've just brought to your attention. But we also, and we have the webmaster, Joe Kukulka. But it is somewhat of a burden to be the webmaster, and would very much benefit by having an assistant webmaster, people who could upload things or work with Joe and lower his workload. So the other open position is assistant webmaster. So please contact me if you have web skills, website skills, and could work with Joe in any way that you would like to define. And finally, the third issue at hand is in the area of sound and recordings. George Hubbard has generously supplied his expertise over a long period of time recording our talks, and then George, you upload them too, I think, to the website. Yeah, and there's a great archive of past talks there. We need someone to assist George. A few weeks ago, we missed recording Jim Wilson's talk, a beloved speaker for the Sangha here. So we want an assistant sound engineer or something like that. So any of those three that you're interested in, please see me. But the first one, the newsletter production manager, is an essential job that we have to get somebody doing before we can issue the next newsletter. Thank you very much.
I'm just curious, does anyone feel slightly interested in working on the newsletter? Show of hands if anybody might be interested in working on our next newsletter. How about, yeah.
This is a cooperative space. There's no organization behind it except for the people in the room here. We need the extended attendees, the new attendees, which we value greatly, and we believe that you also value the association. That's why you're here. We need people to contribute to these efforts.
How about anyone interested in being an assistant webmaster? Thank you. Thank you. How about anyone being interested in assisting George with the recording? It would not be every week. Thank you. 2 people. Thank you. Paul and Tom. Any other announcements?
Yes, I'm Jerry. I'm your speaker coordinator for the next 4 months. And next week we have a Dharma duo, and some of you people may not be familiar with it. What we do is we have 2 people from the Sangha who come and tell their stories. And next week we have Marty Dooley and Mark Tilley who are going to be our Dharma duo.
Any others? Yes.
My name is Ed, and I'm a community outreach person for the Osher Institute UCSF Staying Well study. And the study, we're in the final phases of recruiting, is for HIV positive people who are not on medication, and they'll be randomized into either a mindfulness-based stress reduction course or an HIV education course. So if either you or anyone you know might qualify for that, please speak with me. I have some cards available here if you'd like any.
Yes.
Not to beat the volunteer drum to death, but October, I forget which week it is, but October we're having a booth in the Castro Street Fair, and we have the booth. I mean, it has to be a symbol. We have the booth, and we're going to need people to staff the booth. October seems like a long ways away, but probably it's going to come a lot quicker than we think. So I'm organizing that. We need people to staff the booth. It should be fun, just hanging out and ogling the guys while you're upstairs. And also, some family skills don't go beyond hanging a picture on the wall. I would also appreciate if somebody would be willing to help me assemble the booth in the beginning. Again, this October, there's no immediate thing, but I want to put the word out and let people think about it. And if you're interested right now, you can get a hold of me and I'll take your name and telephone number.
Yes.
Just a quick question. If someone chooses to consider the manager position for the newsletter, who would they contact later on? Would they send an email to someone, or who would they contact, just so folks will know if someone does choose to assist in that capacity?
Someone else can answer that, Mr.
Well, let one of us know.
Yeah.
Okay. Me, Marvin, Ray.
Is there an email address to someone that can email?
Does the steering committee have an email address?
Well, there's a directory. Yes,
the directory has the addresses of every email addresses of everybody on
to the steering committee is what you're saying.
Anyone.
There is some way of emailing from the website, so somebody listening, if they wanted to participate, they could do that. Yes.
Any other announcements before we close? Okay, I believe Tom's going to lead us in the dedication.
By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from this sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity without too much attachment or too much aversion, and live believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.